So how's everyone this morning? We all appreciate everyone getting up so early in the morning. It's the time that you're getting changed or rushing to work or grab your quick breakfast.
Exactly.
I'm just looking forward to the typhoon tomorrow, right? Seems
Okay.
like
It is
trying to
coming.
work out if I'm just going to be stuck at home for all of tomorrow or yeah, it does seem like it's coming very
Okay.
close.
Yep.
Is the weather right now quite severe or is still quite peaceful?
Lovely.
It's,
Blue
Lovely.
it's a,
skies and yeah.
I was going to say, if it was like this all year round, I wouldn't mind. I mean, there's a bit of a breeze and it's blue skies.
So first of all, while we're waiting for more people to join, um, in our guest list here, we also have our new co-chair of the ESG GreenTech Committee. It's Sandeep. And he is our newly elected co-chair. And thanks for the service of our previous co-chair, Stefan. And we are welcoming more people to meet us in person because upcoming committee meetings, we will have physical events. And so stay tuned and we're going to shake hands and meet in person and share a glass of champagne together. And more detail will be unveiled very soon. And today we are very privileged to have William Yun to have his sharing on ESG data and integration in the fund industry. And we actually used to be colleagues together, although we don't have overlap times. We serve at Moody's Analytics in the credit risk department. And so we have some common colleagues. We actually quite familiar with the international way of looking at modelings. But at the time I worked for Moody's, I wasn't even involved in anything in ESG. And for William, he has vast experience in terms of credit rating and in terms of customer success and market intelligence for Moody's Analytics and doing a lot of project in project finance. It's a very top tier subject matter expert in the APAC region. And today, we're privileged that he is now head of marketing intelligence for Blue Onion. And he's going to talk about his sharing on sustainability in impact investing. And William, feel free to introduce you more. And we are very happy to have your sharing for the next half an hour. And I'm sure we're going to have some very interesting Q&A after that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andre. Yeah. So as Andre said, I mean, basically the right introduction. We used to work for the same company. And prior to Moody's, I've worked for a number of large banks, so American ones and European ones as alike. Worked in different locations, so London, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia. Tried a few things here and there. And essentially my focus used to be on asset financing, so projects in general. So your transportation, your power plants, your social housing, even prisons and hospitals and the like. So a number of interesting things that I've looked at in the past. So right now, as Andre correctly said, I'm at Blue Onion. Blue Onion is a ESG Fintech platform. And with this sort of experience with ESG, hopefully I can share a little bit how and where I see the ESG industry, especially around the data side and how data can be used. So that's hopefully be interesting to everyone within the call. So let me just share my screen and get myself started. Right. So I guess the screen share is on. Cool. Excellent. Right. So if I move on to the next page, essentially over the next half an hour, I'm trying to go through these things. So really, all this hype around ESG ratings and ESG score, is there a real purpose? Does it really help people to understand and improve? And then who are the guys that are using it? Can we really trust these providers? What are the frameworks? I mean, there are many. We've probably heard things like SASB and GRI and different frameworks around the world. And what are they? And I share my view around it. And then is ESG something useful that is helping to address problems that this world's facing, especially around sustainability? Hopefully we'll have a discussion around that after the call as well, but I'll share a few more where my values hold. And then around this, I'm going to also cover specific frameworks and problems that are within the fund industry itself, and then also share about how fund managers are integrating ESG into their investment strategies. And then lastly, I'm just going to do a quick demo on what Blue Onion is doing to try and address some of these issues. So as we all sort of know, we all use ChatGPT nowadays to find out things and see what a quick answer looks like. So I did the same just before the call. I basically went to ChatGPT and asked them what's the purpose of ESG ratings. It doesn't really help. So I came up with these 5 different reasons, and I probably agree with all of them, but they sort of they're probably very general, right? So yes, risk management. We all know that potentially bad governance in a company over time, the quality of company may deteriorate. But having a bad ESG rating doesn't necessarily mean that there's only bad governance, right? Governance could score very highly, but they may not be perform well under other metrics like social metrics or certain environmental metrics. And the reason why they're performing badly could be the fact that there's no regulation in that country that enforces them to adhere to higher standards of environmental requirements, or from a social perspective, there may be cultural norms that's how that country operates, and therefore what we in the Western world see as a right social factors may not apply to that country. So does it really help risk management? And one would argue yes, one would argue no. And then we obviously see who really the stakeholders are. So that's one thing to bear in mind. Next is performance evaluation. So there's been a lot of back testing being done around the market, and in fact at Blue Onion, one of my colleagues, Dr. Agnes Tai, actually did a PhD in the valuation of Hong Kong stock prices and basically ESG score. And she found some positive correlation and a strong use case, but that's not all sort of agreed throughout the whole industry. I mean, a lot of people would say making money comes first, performance comes first. Having a high ESG score doesn't necessarily mean that your share price or stock price performs. So that's something that is also something to bear in mind. But obviously, a high ESG score showing consistent improvement does tend to tell you that this company is trying to become more sustainable, and they have decent governance and ethical practices in place. Stakeholder engagement. So we all know that pension funds and the large institutional investors provide very strict mandates on what they want to invest in and how these investments can potentially be achieved. And through their sort of fund managers are trying to demonstrate that they've got this ability to handle these stakeholders and make sure that their investment strategies work. And then on the other side is obviously employees and clients of these companies. Employees want to be treated well. Employees want to be working in a good working condition, good diversity, etc. And all those are factors that I think most of us would agree to, if not all. So I think stakeholder engagement, by demonstrating that you score well in certain S and G factors, it does provide that level of agreement or acceptance within your stakeholders. I think that's obviously very important. And then the fourth topic here is responsible investing, which is what I'm going to try and focus a lot on today, especially within the fund industry. And then on the fifth point here is transparency and accountability. Absolutely. So the more you disclose around your practices, the more other people can start evaluating and analyzing and really taking a view on how good you are compared to others within the industry itself. So ESG ratings, a lot of logos on the screen. You probably recognize at least half of these, I guess, because they're present in Asia. And for the other half that you don't really recognize, I mean, they're probably more European or US centric, so to speak. I mean, some of them have been acquired by others. So for example, Vigil Areas have been acquired by Moody's when I was working at Moody's, and that's where I started my ESG journey. So at Moody's, we've acquired a number of ESG related companies to try and foster a more integrated risk assessment approach. So i.e. looking at not only credit risk, but looking at also cyber risk and ESG risk and etc., and try to include it all into one. And then another one is FTAHK. FTAHK is now acquired by ESG Bullock. So there's been a lot of consolidation within the industry, especially at the middle to upper tiers. But then again, everyone has their own methodology around this. So having these acquisitions doesn't mean that they're aligning, and that's necessarily the case. A lot of investors in the market, as some of you experts will know, is that they're trying to acquire a market share, acquire a revenue stream, and that's not to say that they are in agreement with how they rate a company. So you might even find that FTAHK has a different ESG rating compared to ESG Book, even though they're all under one umbrella at the moment. So the next big question is, can we trust these ESG scores? I mean, everyone's giving ratings. Credit ratings are probably a bit more easier, but there's only 3 major players in the market. And these 3 major players would try to align themselves with the outlook. And that's mainly because they don't want to be completely different and having to explain themselves. Otherwise, no one would trust them. Obviously, we've seen the global financial crisis and other issues where rating agencies have gone wrong. And no one's got the crystal ball, so to speak. But basically, rating agencies from an outlook perspective, they try to keep themselves aligned. Well, ESG scores, do we see this level of alignment? And the answer is no. So if you take one rating provider and do a correlation against another rating provider, and we're talking about a decent data set of like 1,000+ companies here, you probably find that correlation amongst the best is probably around 0.7. Amongst the worst or the biggest discrepancies, it comes to around 0.3. So you do see that massive gap in how one company or one provider is rating a company versus another. Some tend to be a bit more conservative and some a bit more aggressive. So the likes of MSCI tend to be a bit more aggressive, whereas S&P and Trucost, for example, they tend to be a bit more conservative in their ratings. At least that's what we've seen over the past couple of years. So therefore, the answer is there's no standardization. What is the standard? Who creates the standard? There isn't really one at the moment. And we're all interpreting the different frameworks in our own ways. And that's how the market is currently standing. So therefore, just from a bullet point perspective, as you see, this is really what's happening within the industry itself. So if you're not very familiar with the ESG world, just quickly share the main frameworks within the ESG space. So SASB is an industry-specific framework. So basically, they have a framework, and for every industry, they have a different set of materiality factors. So therefore, they're saying that in this industry, you should focus on these factors because they're more important in this industry, for example. And then TCFD, as we all know, and also Hong Kong has also adopted it. It's really focusing on climate-related issues and risk and challenges. So really is a temperature climate focused framework. GRI, you might be surprised, but GRI has been around since 2011. So it's been over 12 years since the GRI framework has been sort of formally sort of spread to market, and everyone knows that the US is behind this. But the GRI framework is a very complex framework. There's like 200+ things that a company will have to try and address and try and substantiate before you get anything meaningful out of it. So a lot of companies try to avoid, and then with the fact of trying to demonstrate that they're trying to accumulate as much data as they can, they do have the GRI framework sitting at the back of their mind and ensuring that the sustainability manager or chief sustainability officer is trying his or her best to go within the company and try and source as much data that's relevant to the GRI framework as possible. So there is this sort of trend towards accumulating as much information as you can within a company. So when you need to address it, then you've got the ability to. All right, UNGC is very simple. UNGC is just a framework that basically internationally recognized with really 4 things. It's labor right, environmental, human rights, and anti-corruption. So really the core bread and butter of what every company should be doing. and really assessing themselves on. ISSB, as we all know, is coming to play, is the accounting principles that sits behind SASB, that evaluates really how much risk you have as related to things such as carbon, such as physical risk, such as transition risk. So they're asking really companies to put a value against all these risks that you've identified, and it will be implemented. And I think in Europe, it's already there. In Asia, especially in Hong Kong, Singapore, it's coming through. In Japan, I think they're also very supportive. SFDR is, as you can see by those stars on the screen, is a European standard. It's a European standard to actually classify funds, to say whether funds are impactful, whether they've got sustainability measures in place, and really it's just to categorize that type of investment. So the sort of way they look at it is sitting on the back of SASB. So generally, they do support the industry view more than a umbrella view of taking every factor into consideration, as you see on the GRI. So the last one is a familiar circle to everyone. The UN has been promoting a lot of work around sustainable development goals. Even at school, I understand that primary education or kids at primary school are exposed to UN SDGs now. So teachers talk about why it's bad, why you need to eradicate poverty and so forth. Because I used to tutor part-time, and I was quite surprised that one of the kids that I tutored basically could regurgitate all 17 goals. I mean, I remember the 17 goals. I don't remember the order, but he remembers basically the whole circle. So that's really how much work that the education, the schools are doing now, to ensure that the concept of basic human living or sort of basic environmental aspects are drummed into kids, and ensuring that we have a more sustainable future, especially around the environmental and poverty piece. So problems that we're trying to address, and this, as you can see, are basically all the things that you might be against from a values perspective. The first one's sort of having a tomato, that we're trying to improve the quality through adding chemicals to it. So maybe a GMO good potentially. War, gun violence, etc. We all know about that. And then if you go further across the right-hand side, landmines, they're still very present in a lot of countries. They're trying to capture animals, but ultimately humans suffer. And then going down all the way to the bottom, gambling. Gambling is an issue, but I think a lot of people, especially in Hong Kong, a lot of people go over to Macau and come back the next day with a different person. Right. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of what we're trying to address today, the fund industry. There's a huge, obviously, it's a massive industry. We all know this. 65 trillion at the moment was the asset size of the global fund industry. Hong Kong sitting around 3.9 at the moment, 3.9 trillion US. We all have pensions, we all sort of do investments, we all save, and essentially we don't know what these fund managers are doing. I mean, taking our MPFs and they're sticking into investments, hoping for long-term growth, but are these investments they're making sustainable? Do they align with our values? We really don't know. And even though we say, okay, let's go to products that we have a bit more control over, so basic funds that you bought, so like mutual funds that you buy through banks or other distribution networks, where you see the fund fact sheets to tell you who they invest in, but they only tell you the top 10 investments they make, and maybe the top 10 investments they make, and then a little chart telling you that from an industry perspective, this is how they're diversified, and from a region or country perspective, this is how they are diversified, etc. But you don't really see the breakdown, as you don't see the ultimate underlying of every fund, because we just don't have that right to do it. So are we really making investments that are aligned to our values, and are we supporting the concept of doing no significant harm to this world, whether it's an environmental perspective or a social perspective? So it might be indirectly investing into a company that basically has child labor. Do we know that? We don't. So the framework that I earlier mentioned, SFDR, huge framework that is highly supported within Europe. and it looks at funds. And then there's also another one that sits along it called a PAI, the principal adverse impacts, and that is essentially riding on the theme of do no significant harm. So there are really just two key classifications to look at. One is called an Article 8, one's called an Article 9. Article 8 is basically also known as a light green fund. So if you go out and sort of listen to conferences and lawyers speak, they would say, oh, this is a light green fund. Essentially, a light green fund is someone that's been branded in Article 8, and that fund actually tries its best to incorporate ESG into their investments, i.e. they've got thresholds and standards, and they're promoting good ESG. The next one is what we call a proper green fund, or some lawyers would call it a dark green fund, just to differentiate the two. And that's really where a fund is actually making sustainable investments aligned to the fund objective. So yes, so they will be looking at ESG, and more than that, they'll be looking at specific factors. So it may be a carbon transition fund, or it may be a green energy fund, or it could be a fund that is investing in medical health that demonstrates that they're only using sustainable approaches in developing medicine, for example. So there's all these different things to look at. And in the past year and a half to 2 years, if you do do a quick Google, and say, for example, funds that have been rejected by FTAHK, funds that have been reclassified or whatever, you find there has been so many funds that to claim that they basically got Article 9 and then ultimately they didn't meet the FTAHK standards, and they've dropped back to an Article 8. Or in fact, the ESG integration only covers, say, like 20 or even less percentage of the fund, and they don't even meet the Article 8 standards even. So there's been a lot of that in the recent past, and I think last Christmas I saw a news whereby SFDR is suspecting that 1/3 of the funds under Article 8 could be reclassified. So that's where we're seeing, and for fund managers are facing a big issue on really understanding whether the way they're approaching ESG integration does meet the requirements of Article 8 or an Article 9. So really what you need to get there is ultimately data, right? So understanding or seeing through the data on the company, and whether your objective is just general good ESG, or is actually or is really focused on, say, carbon transition, for example. You need to have the metrics underlying to really prove that these companies that you're investing in is having an uptrend or improving over time, that allows you to start making that claim or including it into your constituents, your pool of investments. So what fund managers have been doing over the past few years, by taking all this state data that they're buying from the different data providers, including us, is that they're either sort of screening out things. So for example, negative screening, any company that's involved in that's got a high carbon intensity or high carbon footprint, exclude it, for example. And then from a positive screening perspective, they're saying, I only want companies that have got some level of green revenue or green capex or something positive, essentially, that they're saying that I would only include you into our list if you've got these positive aspects. ESG integration is more of a bespoke approach to basically companies saying that I've got thresholds, and unless certain factors meet these thresholds, I'm not going to include you into our white list of potential companies to invest in. Impact investing is, as I said, the Article 9s, and they'd be more strict around specific metrics that they're looking at. And then UNGC principles, which I earlier mentioned, it's really just 4 things: labor, human rights, environment, and anti-corruption. So really scoring pretty well on UNGC gives you that foundation to say that this company that I'm investing in is relatively good amongst this peer group. But I mean, these factors, right? We're looking, as I said earlier, on the tons. I mean, under the GRI, there's 200 plus factors. So from where we're buying data at the moment, and if I was to break it down even further, there's probably around 500-600 plus factors that you can look at. But generally, the market agrees that data points wise, there are at least 250 ESG factors to look at if you were to try and include an active ESG integration into your investment strategies. And that's assuming you want full coverage of all the of every E, S, and G pillar that you're looking at. You're wanting a good score on all three. So where Blue Onion comes in, as I said, we are essentially a rating agency as well. And the way we do it is that we buy data from the recognized data providers in the market. And some of them will be Sustainalytics, Ideal Rating, ESG work, and the likes, basically. So we buy this data and then we start integrating the data. And the way we integrate is that we firstly look at the best in class. So if rating provider 1 and rating provider 2 provide the same metric, then we validate it, we check it, and then if they're both the same, then we obviously go for the one with the biggest coverage. If they're not the same, then we try to deep down understand how they computed that data point or how they quantify that data point. And then we'll try and sort of make sure that 1 is the latest data and 2 it's the one that makes the most sense. And then that's where we apply our analytics into this. So we're analyzing all different data points, and then we're trying to weight which ones are more important, following the SASB in industry materiality mapping. And then we do our own modeling behind the scenes. So the modeling is really computing ESG risk and ESG score. And then afterwards, what we do is we try to optimize the coverage of all the companies, and then once that, we can be rating funds. So obviously funds are just a bunch of companies, right? They're either company equities or bond or some sort of financial instrument that's within a fund. So by aggregating all these scores and weighting it in relevance to basically the weights within each fund, then we're able to look at a fund and we're able to screen out issues on the fund and also identify how that fund's performing. And that's where the solution comes in. So just to give you a bit more about the ecosystem that Blue Onion is basically sitting ourselves on. So we work with all these data providers on the first column. The column in the middle is all the frameworks that we do support. So as I mentioned, we are focused on SASB. And we're also working towards generating reports that comply to TCFD. And we are a PRI company, so we do basically follow the principles for responsible investment. And then the rest of them, as you can see, just different councils or standards, or maybe commitments that people are following. And we're also making sure that the companies that we cover, if they do have these certain commitments or adhere to certain standards, we obviously give them a tick in the box. Right, so what I'll do right now is I'll give you a quick demo of a product that we are developing, and just to show you how you can potentially screen out your own investments if you were to make use of such a product. Are you able to see a mobile phone on Figma? Just checking.
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. So this is a prototype that we developed, and this prototype essentially is trying to allow banks and investors to basically work together and start sort of deciding on how they can optimize their investments. So if I start sort of screening this, whoops, a bit too quick. Yeah. So essentially, as you can see, you can be screening in. So what you support, as in the positive inclusion. So say, for example, I want habitat protection and I want to have green and low carbon business within my investments. I've chosen them. And then what you oppose is what they want to screen out. Say, for example, I'm really anti-animal cruelty and really waste pollution is a big issue, and not air pollution for some reason, but let's just assume that. And then I confirm my factors that I've chosen. Then I save this as one of my investment sort of strategies, and we can see what sort of funds can come through. So this is a portfolio that ICBC has, and and basically we're using the one that we gave them as a demo here. So the screening, so basically under my screening criteria, fidelity seems to be one that performed pretty well. And so I've chosen fidelity. And let's just take a look at how they perform under various things. So basically, as you can see, or normally what you see on FactSet or Bloomberg or Morningstar, blah, blah. We actually provide a full underlying holding. So you can actually see all the companies if you wanted to under our platform. Under this mobile version, we're only showing top 10. But if the client was paying for the full extensive, we can actually show all holdings up to 1,000 holdings within the fund itself. And this is where the important stuff comes into play, the ESG play. So what we do is that we dissect the companies and we show exactly what percentage is rated under our blue onion methodology within this fund. And then you can see the ESG scores and environmental, social, and governance scores. And as I earlier mentioned, UNGC is a good basis to start because there are 4 very basic principles that every company should adhere to. I mean, if the overall fund isn't performing well, even from a UNGC perspective, then you know they've got a number of companies in there that aren't really enforcing sustainability, and nor are they providing enough data that allows us to be rating them under UNGC. Then the business involvement. So earlier on, I selected a few metrics, but there are also other metrics that you could be against. So it's telling you that within this fund, you have exposure to companies that are involved in abortion-related medication. There's actually adult entertainment-related investments in this fund, cannabis, defense, fossil fuels, and etc. So now you know that you're investing into this fund, you're actually indirectly allocating your capital to support all these types of businesses that could be potentially controversial under your view. It may not be completely controversial under everyone's view. One, I mean, certain countries support these industries, and two, is that you really need certain of these things to be running. Otherwise, basic necessities may not even be fulfilled. So there are obviously different views here. I mean, some people might say that fossil fuel, even though it's bad, but many countries' budgets actually depend on the continuation of extraction and the use of fossil fuels. Carbon intensity, one of the big things that I think everyone's looking at nowadays, and therefore we actually make sure that regardless whether you feel you value low carbon exposure, we will tell you carbon is an important metric without really focusing on understanding or now trying to make an effort into reducing sort of carbon emissions. I mean, hopefully we will get there, but if not, then by 2100 or maybe 2110, probably most humans will not be living on this earth. And you've seen a lot of reports around this, and this is quite true, because we won't survive if the temperatures keep on escalating every year. So that's really the demo around our product that we're developing at the moment. So I'll just quickly switch back to the presentation. And this is one of our other products, and I could go through that if there's time, but at the moment we're looking at running out of time. So I'll jump straight to Q&A, and if you want to get sort of speak to me a bit further, you're more than welcome to. And thank you to the Fintech Association of Hong Kong for actually inviting me to speak.
Thank you so much, William. It's very intriguing to see the demo and also your very, very detailed introductions of all the different ESG authoritative body across different jurisdictions, and also these supporting standard from different ESG player where the industry get more choices of I think in the realm of non-standard in the ESG reporting, and very highly appreciated. I have a question to ask you, but I would like to leave the first few questions to the audience before I ask you, especially on the product demo. So go ahead, audience. We have over 10 people joining today. Feel free to have very interactive Q&A sessions. And so I welcome everyone to raise the first questions, the first few questions. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Andre, hi, Sandeep. Probably I'll start then.
Sandeep.
So yeah, William, hi. Very informative. Kind of you provided the background as well before kind of obviously going into the demo. So very useful. So you kind of highlighted the challenges around different ratings, and in your solution, you obviously look at different data sources and partners. So how do you kind of reconcile if there are differences between these different data sources? How do you kind of help reconcile those differences when you kind of present your solution in the demo?
Right, fantastic question. That is exactly one of the questions I was expecting. So as I mentioned earlier, I mean, basically all the different data providers covers largely the similar, or I would say the same metric points. Although they might title it slightly differently, and they might have a slightly different way of quantifying it. So as we know, there's a lot of factors under the S pillar specifically that cannot be directly quantified, right? So how do they actually do this quantification? We actually look at how they first had to describe that factor, and two is that we'll take some samples and we'll try and do some independent verification ourselves to understand what is it that they're seeing or they're defining, and does that definition align with the frameworks that we are also trying to adhere to? Because at the moment within the fund space, I mean, a lot of fund managers sort of have signed up to the PRI, but they don't really claim that they support a certain framework. So from our perspective, where we're serving these clients, we're trying to align ourselves into how they're progressing and to ensure that we're in the same path. Is that we say we support these frameworks, but again, we're not saying we're 100% aligned to these frameworks. So that's, I think, a quite important point to bear in mind. So what we do is, again, once we've scoped out and vetted out these metric points, we obviously use the ones that we think are the most aligned to the framework. The next, what we look at is what we call coverage. Because if one provider only has, say, 600 companies and another provider has 2,000 companies, what we're going to do, we're going to ignore those 2,000 metric points provided by provider B and just focus on provider A. So the answer is no. So the answer is we will try and blend it a little bit so that we can increase the coverage. But that's really what the fund industry needs. The reason why MSCI doesn't really produce fund ratings, for example, versus Morningstar and Sustainalytics that actually provides fund rate ratings is because of coverage. MSCI doesn't have that extensive coverage. Sustainalytics has a much larger one, for example. So that's what we try to do. And then I think on your third point on actually making sure that the metrics are up to date. So we do a check on a regular basis to see the date, and if it's more than a year, then this provider is really falling behind, as in they're slow to the game. Those reports come out on at least a half-yearly basis, if not annual. So if these metric points are over a year old, then something's happening, and that will be flagged, and we will investigate and then review whether we continue using this metric point as a right metric point.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And just one point on the frameworks. So obviously, multiple frameworks, difficult to catch up in terms of how these are developing and obviously to incorporate into the model. So it's a fantastic job you're doing. You kind of incorporating and supporting so many frameworks. So I think you indicated already you're giving priority to PRI. But again, like the different data sources, how are you kind of balancing between the different frameworks? Is it more that certain investors are looking at certain frameworks and then you kind of tailor your response based on which specific framework the investor is looking at, or you kind of, for all your funds, looking at all the different frameworks?
Great question again. So firstly, our basic model It's based on SASB. So SASB is our foundation. And then under our professional investor hub, which is not on mobile yet, it's actually on just on PC version, so SaaS PC version. That will allow the user to switch between SASB and GRI, and that's something that's coming. That's something that we're developing, and also the TCFD component, which is focused on the climate piece. The investor can also switch to the lens under TCFD. Okay. So it's a completely different algorithm that we're running, based on largely the same data set.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Yes, William, good morning.
Hey, Will, good morning.
Hi, how are you doing? Excellent presentation as ever. Just a quick question. Who do you see as the main sort of buyers of your screening service? For example, wealth managers. I mean, is this much overhyped subject of hyper personalization? Do you see financial advisors sort of sitting down and say with their clients and say, what do you care about out of the 17 SDGs, and we'll build your portfolio around it? And then just one sort of tongue-in-cheek question is, who's paying for these ratings? Is it the companies themselves? And I would never try and suggest that managers would sort of pick a particular rating agency because their remuneration is based on it or something.
Fantastic point. It's especially the latter point. So the world of ratings at the moment, certain rating agencies obviously charge to cover to have that company covered under the remit, right? And that is an issue. That is a big issue, because with the ability to be charging a client, what that means a one-to-one relationship whereby the rating agency will try and adjust or massage the way they're collecting the data, especially if it's non-quantifiable data, whereby they can integrate it into their methodology and try and ensure that rating isn't too bad, as in the rating is kind of massaged a certain way. And that is the truth. And even in the previous days, when I started working in CMBS, much earlier in my career, which is commercial mortgage-backed securities, just before when the GFC exploded back in 2008. So I used to cover DCM, structured commercial mortgages. I worked with all three rating agencies in Europe, and essentially when we were cutting tranches of debt, we would go to and back a few times to try and get that percentage right so that we can optimize our profits. And some of you on a call may be hearing, so really rating agencies aren't really independent. So they're not independent at all. If you're paying someone and they want to have this recurring business coming, you have to have that relationship going in order to ensure this repeat the business. But the likes of, say, for example, Bloomberg or ourselves, Blue Onion, we don't charge companies to rate. Essentially, we're doing it for free. We're actually rating them at our own costs, essentially, because we're trying to use our ratings and actually develop new products that actually help everyone within the ecosystem be able to access what we call democratizing data and integrating it into the ecosystem. So that's what we are ultimately trying to do as a mission. So sorry for sort of sidestepping away, and I'll come back to Will's question. Right, the users or the use cases. I guess the wealth managers is really one of the starting points. So at the moment, we are working with two banks, whereby they are looking to adopt the demo that I demonstrated, and that can be on a phone, or it can be on a tablet, or even your normal Windows or PC version. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to allow people to screen very quickly. So as you saw through the demo, I'm not going through the 17 SDGs, I'm not going through SASB or whatever. What I'm really doing is, what are your values? What do you want to include in your investments? And what are you against? And then you go through and you look at the financial performance, and you also look at really what business involvements there are in this fund. And you might say, oh, I don't really want this fund. I actually want one that hasn't got this. So we can also start screening that out again. So I mean, everyone obviously chooses the fund that perform the best and hopefully provides them the best return over time, whether the investment time period is 3 months or 10 years. But ultimately, people need to know what they're investing in. I mean, we can all say we want to allocate capital to this and that, but do you really know what it is? And that's what it is. So insurance companies are slower to the game. But I think banks, whereby they try and demonstrate that they are different. So if you go to HSBC, for example, nowadays, they've also got thematic investments under ESG, and they've got classified funds under different ESG subheadings. Standard Chartered has exactly the same. Standard Chartered, in fact, is working with Sustainalytics. And I know throughout basically Standard Chartered from a private banking level all the way to an institutional banking level, most of the internal systems are powered, or the data is powered from Sustain. And then the likes of JP Morgan, for example, a few years ago, they were trying to prop up their investment bank, their private banking and wealth management, to show that they're really focused on E and S. So the G factor is something that's less of a focus. And then they brought a company called Open Invest. And then they've also started integrating the data that they brought for this company. And then their private bankers do actually talk about E&S within the solutions or the portfolios that they do sort of advise their clients. So it may not be going through the SDGs, but it's actually going through, do you really want to be putting more money into fossil fuels? Do you want to be putting more money into companies that are involved in GMO, for example? So that's the sort of conversations that private bankers are having with their clients. And this extends one step further to family offices. So the banks that do serve family offices tend to talk about this as a topic of discussion. And then after this, then they start screening down, because it's really hard to look at a massive universe and start recommending funds or recommending investment options to clients. There has to be a few starting points, and the starting points could be around just purely asset class. So whether you're looking at infrastructure or looking at oil and gas or whatever, or the starting conversation could be around your investment values, what you're trying to achieve.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks very much. Yeah. I might have a clown for you.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Will.
Hi, William. Andre. I'm sorry. I leave it to the other audience. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Jill, raise a hand.
Sorry, Andre. Hi, it's Jill. Thank you so much. It's been very, very helpful to understand that someone is doing. I'm from fintech industry, and I want to understand if you have any use cases which was specifically impactful on the fintech industry, if you could name it, because I'm looking for the global standardized measurement and traceability and embodied in the fintech flow. Usually it's onboarding when you are onboarding clients or in a RegTech, but I want to understand. Thank you.
Sorry, I lost half your question because your voice was breaking out a little bit. So you're asking for specific use cases around certain standards that I hear?
Sorry, my question was, if you have specific use cases from fintech industry, where and how you embody the solution, that's been very impactful, and you've got the accurate data.
Okay, thanks, Jill. So I guess fintech, as we all know, is just a very broad term for leveraging technology in order to empower financial transactions, right? So what we're doing here is, I guess there's a separate use case that I can talk about that's very similar to the demo that I demonstrated, is that we're working with a company that specializes in using machine learning. And what we're trying to do is that we're trying to use machine learning to really optimize a portfolio called a fund of funds. So really we're creating a new fund that invests into multiple funds that aligns with certain values and provides a much larger One, obviously, we all talk about diversity in investment. We all talk about whether we can pick up risks and sort of draw down risks. Then we also look at whether there's overlap of your holdings. So we're investing in 5 funds, and for some strange reason, all these 5 funds, they love HSBC, for example, and it's suddenly your portfolio has an exposure of HSBC of over 7%, and that could be obviously a high concentration. So we're doing a lot of work around using machine learning to actually further diversify your investments into making a portfolio of a fund of a fund. So that's one use case that we're trying to sort of integrate into our offerings at the moment. It's still under back testing stage, but that's something that we're doing. And then maybe another use case would be asset managers. So there are a number of asset managers in Taiwan at the moment that are using our product. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to report to regulators that they follow something called the 8 principles in Taiwan, and the 8 principles around environment, essentially. So they're using our tool to make investments or to even screen out companies whereby these companies do not fulfill these so-called 8 principles. So then afterwards, it's an automated process of us updating that list every day or every month, really. And then that allows them to be trading on companies that really fulfill or actually do not breach these so-called 8 principles. So that's another use case that our product facilitates.
Hello, William. It's Andre. I'm a programmer, and go down to technical stuff. And
love it.
Yeah, first of all, I love your demo in terms of one of the Fidelity Fund, Sustainability Global Dividends Plus Fund, and with the business involvement. Let's say if I'm the end user and I saw that there is something called abortion medication, and does it drill down into like the distribution of the portfolio company within the fund? Just kind of like, I think even those 12 metrics there may not be evenly distributed. So will there be any breakdown? And also, if I really drill into which portfolio company that are more severe in this area, is this kind of granularity available? And second questions would be, there are many local players. What I can name from the Earth Forum in Cyberport this year. One of the panelists that next to me was UG Vest. They also doing some analytics for the fund, for the asset managers. And one of the differentiators they claim, I haven't looked at the product, is that the lacking of understanding of Chinese language and culture. So this is exactly the vision and mission of the website. So I just want to know how these kind of non-listicle or even I would say Western-centric company data would have this. Does it have equal amount of coverage for the same kind of framework or calculations?
Okay, cool. So I guess there's 3 questions there. One is, can you see the breakdown of the fund? The answer is yes in our more extensive version. So the version that I showed you is one that was specifically created for a specific bank, because that's what they wanted under their requirement list. So the answer is yes. So we do have the complete full holdings. In fact, I could probably put on our main product, which we will show you that we do have the full holdings.
Yeah.
Okay, on your second question, and that you saw the Earth Forum, yes, absolutely. There are a number of companies trying to adopt this space, and the adoption may not be purely just by providing a fund rating, but the adoption is around, do you look at all the factors in an equal way, and how do you actually make assessments on these things? And it is really, as I said at the start, is a rating alone, standing alone, specific, is it good enough? Do you really need a bit more? So even with credit ratings, for example, right? In the past, you just had 9 bands from, and then now we've gone up to a 21-point scale, right? So that 9 band is a triple A down to a single D. And now we've got your AA plus and AA minus, so it goes up to 21-point scale. So why is it sort of spread it out? It's because obviously there's been discrepancies around things, and people are trying to quantify a bit further. And now we've got outlook, right? Whether stable, positive, negative outlook. So it's the same throughout. I mean, we're going through exactly the same journey now on the ESG rating, ESG score. So, for example, MSCI started. They haven't started. They only have 7 bands at the moment, and they have 7 grades. And obviously, a lot of people don't agree with the 7 grades, and that's essentially why you've got the likes of UGVS coming up with their own perspective, and also the cultural element, as I earlier said, is more of a social thing. But there are a lot of social factors that may not apply. So, I mean, again, I'm not going to home in on any country, but there are certain countries within this world that follow a certain religion, and that certain religion does not empower women to be at leadership levels. And now that the Western world has asked for at least 30% representation of females either on the board or on the INED as an independent non-executive level, what they're doing is they're just basically placing the family members or extended family members onto the board, or maybe the not non-executive board, and the voting is it independent? I mean, we all can imagine it's not, right? Because these guys are just being placed there from an A perspective just to show that diversity exists. And then I think there's a few more things that we look at, is that certain countries may say eating pork is wrong, or certain countries may even say eating certain types of meat is wrong, right? But is that right or wrong? Again, I don't necessarily agree or disagree, but there are cultural aspects around that. And then the next thing is what is called sustainable working conditions. Again, everyone has a slightly different sort of way around what is sustainable. And the last thing I want to be home in on, I know we're running out of time, is power. So if you are based in a country that the government has made a lot of investment into renewable power, and therefore you're making use of renewable power, and hence your overall carbon emissions are low, is that really a factor of the company itself, or is that a factor of the country itself? So what I think a lot of people, especially like UGVS, which I know very well as well, is that they understand that China is making massive steps in terms of transition-wise, but there are obviously still a lot of issues relating to, especially around pollution, and especially around working conditions, that they need to be re-standardized. So the best in China, I mean, it may not be the equivalent of the best in France, for example, but we do need to sort of highlight that there are restrictions around this, and this restriction do need to be flagged. And that's where I think UGVS is trying to come. But UGVS is very focused on carbon related. I think from the governance perspective, they are. I'm not, again, just a personal view. I think on the governance side, they're not really putting a lot of attention to governance.
Great, thank you, William. We already reached 9 a.m. and I know that many of you guys need to rush back to work. And so I'm not going to open the floor for more questions now. And I'm sure we will have a lot of questions for you. So that's the contact of William Yun. So happy for anyone here to reach out to William. And yes, I'm sure that we were going to have more and more sharing we need from you, because there are lots of deep dive questions which are very interesting. And Sandeep, do you have any other feedback or any?
No, thanks, Andre.
Thanks. Sorry that we don't have time to introduce you further, because you're also our new committee members. And so let's leave it for next time. And without further ado, I would like to end the call because everyone needs to rush back to work. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you guys in person in the next coming months. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
a lot
for your great sharing.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.